Yes. Yes.
Otherwise, not very useful.
But
Yeah,
I suggest
absolutely.
that you could also take individual talks, put your label on it, and circulate the individual talks. Nowadays, they're cutting the talks in 20 minutes or 15-minute short snippets as well.
Sure. That's a good suggestion too. And we will work on amplifying it as much as we can. We will push it through various channels. So it might be hosted on Vigil, but that's not the only forum on which it would stream or it would be there.
So you have several people who've signed in. Yeah.
Yes. We can start now.
Yeah, I think that.
Namaste, everyone. Thank you for joining Vigil in this webinar today on defining Hindutva. We are live on YouTube. We are on Twitter and Facebook and Instagram. These links would come up in chat. So if you wish to forward it to anyone before we begin, please feel free to do so. And thank you for taking time out and joining us today. We will start with a prayer song, a Mangala Shloka before we start. Om Sahana Vavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti.
Akshaya, if I can interrupt, Mayuri has joined and she can do the Vande Mataram rendition as well, just we begin.
Okay. Mayuri, is your mic and video set?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So we had actually planned to start with Vande Mataram. Now that Mayuri has joined us, we will proceed with our national song.
Mayuri, to switch on your video, ma.
Vande Mataram, Vande Mataram, Sujalam, Sufalam, Malayaja Sheetalam, Sashya Shyamalam, Mataram, Vande Mataram. Suprajyotsna Pulakitayamini Pullakusumita Drumadala Shombini Suhasini Sumadhura Bhashini Sukhadambaradam Mataram Vande Mataram. Koti Koti Kanta Kala Kala Ninada Karale Koti Koti Bhujai Drita Kara Karavale Abala Kenumaya Tubale Bahu Baladarini Namami Darini Ripudhalavarini Mataram Vande Mataram. Tumi Vidya, Tumi Dharma, Tumi Hridi, Tumi Marma, Tvam hi Prana Sharire, Bahute Tumi Ma Shakti, Hridaye Tumi Ma Bhakti. तुम्हारे प्रतिमा गड़ी मंदिरे मंदिरे मातरम वंदे मातरम. त्वं हि दुर्गा दश प्रहरधारिणी कमला कमलदल विहारिणी वाणी विद्यादायिनी नमामि कमलाम् अमलामतुलां सुजलां सुफलां मातरं श्यामलां सरलां सुष्मितां भूषितां धरणीं भरणीं मातरं वन्दे मातरम् वन्दे मातरम् वन्दे मातरम्. Thank you.
Thank you for the rendition, Mayuri.
Thank you.
Good evening, everyone, once again, and welcome to today's webinar. The topic for today's webinar is defining Hindutva. Now, why have we chosen this topic? In recent times, the term Hindutva has been in news globally, as all of you would be aware. And there are various narratives being spun around it by various people. Some term it as political Hinduism, some term it as Hindu extremism, some say it's a nationalist form of Hinduism. It has been called many things, but none of them is articulated by people who really matter. The only people who really matter, who are everyday Hindus, practicing Hindus themselves. So in this VIGIL panel, we are bringing to you the voices of the foremost Hindu intellectuals in telling us or defining what Hindutva really is and what Hindutva isn't. Is Hindutva only a political term, or is there a religious and a spiritual basis for it? Swami Mitranandaji will be speaking on this aspect. Hindutva is often portrayed as anti-women or anti-feminist. And our speaker, Rami Niranjan Desai will actually explore the connection between Shakti and Hindutva, or feminism and Hindutva. Shri Pavan K. Verma will address us on the intertwining of politics and Hindutva. Is Hindutva being used as a political ideology? That is something he would elaborate on. And of late, we have all seen the term being weaponized by certain lobbies against Hindus globally. Shri Rajiv Malhotra will highlight to us the implication Hindutva has for Hindus around the globe, and will also speak to us on the attacks around the world that is riding on this term. Just a few announcements. You are free to ask your questions. Please address your questions through the program to the host, which is VIGIL India. Please mention the speaker to whom you wish to address your question. And we would be taking questions after all the speakers speak at the end of the speaker discussion. We start today with Pujaniya Swami Mitranandaji. Mitranandaji is a disciple of Gurudev, His Holiness Swami Chinmayananda. He serves as a spiritual teacher of Chinmaya Chennai. He's the director of national projects for the All India Chinmaya Yuva Kendra and the publisher of Chinmaya Udghosh, an international youth magazine. He also initiated the Chinmaya Institute of Management, the Chennai chapter, which is reaching out to colleges and corporate organizations with a blend of management and spirituality. A highly sought after speaker in the corporate circle, Swamiji regularly gives lectures on the Upanishads, Bhagavad Gita, and other traditional texts. We are indeed privileged to have Swamiji open this session for us, and he will share with us his views on spiritual Hindutva. Swamiji, over to you.
Thank you. Namaskar. My salutations to Rajiv Malhotra ji, Rami Desai ji, and to all others present. Pranam. Akshay, please tell me, is my volume okay?
Yes, we can hear you perfectly well.
Thank you. Right. There was a man, he was slightly late and he has to reach the railway station. And there was a farm in between. If he goes around the farm, to get to the station would be late and he'll miss the train. So he thought he will cut across the farm, take a shortcut, cut across and go there. That there was a possibility for him to reach the station on time. So he'll ask one guy in the farm, if I trespass your farm, will I be able to get to the station quickly? Will I get the train fast? Will I get there on time for the train? The farmer's son who was standing there, he looks at him and he says, ha, you will. And if the bull in the farm sees you, you will get there before time. You will get there before time. So the guy was hesitating, but even he took his chance. Now, why I told you this is, the lobbies who recently took up dismantling global Hindutva, to those lobbies we should be thankful. They played the role like a bull, made many sleeping Hindus wake up. I know too many people in the system around me, few sannyasis and all that woke up. Till then they were probably doing their work, did not look into what is to be done. Most people woke up like saying, what is this happening now? Why? So for this kind of a sudden awakening, I think we should thank these guys, because they can't anyway dismantle. It's only a jargon they had. They can't. We have stood the test of time and we would stand. We were here before they arrived, and we will continue much after them. So that's not an issue, but it did wake up few sleeping Hindus. For that, it is really nice. Where I found quite a few people around me coming to me and saying, you were talking about this earlier, but now we are able to understand, stuff like that. Okay. So that's a good thing of this seminar which they organized. Hindutva, spiritually, when we look, Hindutva is the original name we had earlier was Sanatan Dharma, and then you call it Hinduism. It came on along the way, and then now the term is used Hindutva. Basically, Sanatan Dharma, the original, or you call it Hinduism, or today what people are trying to call it as Hindutva, in my understanding is one and the same. Why it is one and the same? Because Sanatan Dharma has reached the zenith among the religions in evolution. It has reached. If you look at Sanatan Dharma, there are 6 schools of thought, and you cannot create a 7th school of thought. We have mastered. We have done that. So when it comes to religion, that religion which has reached the zenith is Sanatan Dharma, or Hinduism has reached the zenith. It cannot be improved upon. Why? Because once you reach the heights and once you recognize, it accommodates the most primitive methods of seeking God to the absolute sublime methods of seeking God. These two extreme ends are accommodated. This is why Hinduism is so pluralistic, so accommodative, and so inclusive. There is no religion which is so inclusive like Hinduism. This is because the insight is spirituality. The life in me is the life everywhere. The consciousness in me is the consciousness everywhere. Sarvam Kalvidam Brahma. Everything is nothing but the same divine. And that's why we were the first to call the entire universe as our family. That is spirituality. Hindutva, spiritually, if you see, the slogan is the entire universe is our family, Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. Please remember the word here is universe, not earth, not people living on earth alone. If there is life in Mars, or if there is life in another galaxy, outside Milky Way, in another galaxy, if life exists, that also is part of that same Sarvam Kalvidam Brahma. So everybody, all inclusive, is one divine. This is spiritual insight of Sanatan Dharma. You cannot go beyond that. You have reached the point. And naturally, once you have this great vision that everyone is divine and all inclusive, then there will be places for primitive, starting, and to the absolutely evolved, sublime, formless worship. All are inclusive. Please remember, many religions are not all inclusive. They will be finding it hard to include. Probably people worship a form. Spiritual Hindutva is not that. Spiritual Hindutva is like, you worship form, we are with you. You don't worship a form, we are with you. Whichever way you seek, we are with you. Because you are essentially divine. And different levels of growth we go from unicellular, we all evolve. So somebody is in front in a ladder ahead of you, and you are in the middle, and someone is behind us. So we are having this absolutely inclusive vision of accommodating people who are below us, because we were there some time ago. I'm talking about evolution. And some are ahead of us, probably at the threshold of realization, highly evolved beings, close to divinity. We look up to them and we never look down to the people behind, because we know we were there and we have come to the middle. And the guys who are in front of us, ahead of us, we know that they were in the place where we were, and they have just gone there, and we will catch up. So it is a human evolution, and it is all accommodative and absolutely inclusive. This inclusiveness is what the spiritual Hindutva is about. And this is the reason I'm telling you, now I'm coming little more in detailing. This is the reason why Hindus are in great demand across the world. Hindu diaspora is expanding every day. Across the world, we are expanding. Hindu diaspora is expanding. Why do people want Hindus everywhere to work? Hardworking many people are, but why they prefer Hindus? Because of the heritage which we come from, because of the spiritual heritage we come from. We go there, we look at the other person also as our family, as a right to be here, and we merge with that country where we go, help them to progress together. Parasparam bhavayantaha. This is one of the main principles of Hindutva. Bhagavad Gita says that in the 3rd chapter. You take care of the devas, devas and take care of you. Parasparam. May you progress. May you attain Shreyas. Parasparam, together. This is what we are. So when we go to another nation, the Hindus go to another country, we merge into that country, help that country, contribute what we can, and together we progress. We benefit, they benefit, and they know we are all inclusive. We are not fanatic. They know we are all inclusive. We are very pluralistic, and we are non-controversial. Sometime back, I was discussing with Swami Vijnanananda of VHP. We had a very nice discussion in which Swamiji was telling about the growth of Hindus across the world, in which he pointed out, like the number of graduates would be maximum from Hindu community. Postgraduates, definitely maximum, because graduate level, everybody comes there, postgraduate. And then when it comes to PhD, and at the PhD category, if you see, the Hindu seems to be more and highly well placed. And Swamiji used to say, the only place we will not, Swami Vijnananda said this, and I verified it too. And he said the only place the Hindu population is less, absolutely less, is in the jails, in the prison. So I took this up when he said that, and when in a couple of my travels, be it to Philippines, be it to UK, and like Sri Lanka, Indonesia, I checked with the Indian ambassadors, like saying, how many students come here? From Hindu students are maximum. And then when you ask how many people are in jail, they say that's the minimum. Now you understand how beautifully we are welcomed. Around the world, why are we welcomed? This is the spiritual heritage of Hindutva, where you are welcome because you are You are a contributor and you look at developing together, progressing together, and respecting every other faith. Not demanding anything except for our rights. Not demanding anything else. Because spiritual Hindutva or Hindutva, all inclusive, has no theological enemy. We say every path is fine. The way in which you worship will take you there. You follow that. The way I chose will lead me up. We have no contradictions here. Your path will lead you to God. My path will lead me to God. And our Bhagavad Gita says, spiritual knowledge. Na buddhi bedam janayet. Do not unsettle the mind of people of different levels they are, and they all will reach. So this inclusiveness is the spiritual insight of that truth. Sarvam Kalvidam Brahma. Everybody is the same and everybody is divine, and we are nothing but one extended divine family across the universe, not just earth. So wherever we go, we are. And now this is the problem people have with us. We are a very ancient country, Bharat, but very young population. Look at the combination. Ancient wisdom with young population. This combination is beautiful combination. That's why across the globe, people keep calling Indians and offering jobs, etc. And that's why I said Hindu diaspora is expanding regularly. We already have 1 billion plus population upon this earth. Every 6th person is a Hindu on this earth. So when we have a population of that kind, and with this philosophy of all accommodative, all inclusive, pluralistic, respect every path, every method, we are welcome because we are non-controversial, because our heritage points out how globally everybody is one. So with this, when we go, people are there. Now, what is the problem for people with us? There are anti-Hindu forces because they see Hinduism as their theological enemy. That is the problem. Hinduism doesn't have a theological enemy because we accept everybody. But they have limitations in their thinking. Therefore, they believe just in one book, one Messiah, and they see others as theological enemy. So when the young Indians were moving from India, from Bharat, when they were going and settling down to other nations, they were welcome. And they thought these guys coming there away from their families, away from their culture, away from their heritage, very soon they'll convert. Very soon they'll give up. Their roots will be cut off. This was what they expected. But what happened is last 50, 60 or 70 years, right from Vivekananda, if you take 100 plus years ago, constantly at global level, Hindu organizations started manifesting. There are lots and lots of Hindu organizations manifesting across the globe, global organization. Everybody is doing their job as best as they can do. So when this beautiful thing is going on, these Indians who migrate from here, there, they somehow get connected to any one of these organizations. And once they get connected, they're connected with their roots. That could not be taken away. Their children attend children's classes, the youth get exposure with the youth, and somehow they are connected. They could not be disconnected from their roots. And that's a big role the global Hindu organizations have done. So these people still remain rooted. Now their whole issue is the anti-forces. Their whole issue is we should somehow disconnect them. How do you do? Start calling. If any Hindu anywhere raises his voice for his rights or for his cause, if suppose somebody sets a wrong narrative in our history book and it is taught to us, you go out there and saying, excuse me, this is not right, we need to change, then immediately you will be branded fanatic, fascist, the words used. First was fanatic, then fundamentalist, fascist, Nazi, and now they're trying to put this word Hindutva in that category. So that anywhere in the world, whether be it in Bharat or outside Bharat, if a Hindu has to ask, saying, hey, this is incorrect. What you're interpreting my book is not right. I need to correct it. Oh, you're a Hindutva, fanatic. Now, this is what they're trying to establish. And for that, the plan is, if they manage, they're trying hard. They tried saffron terror some time ago. They use different terms, like in India, when people from the border, from that side of the border came into Bombay and blasted and all that, they want to project it as Hindu saffron terror. We stood that test. We said, no, nothing. There was one policeman, Tukaram. He saved it. He didn't allow what is his name? Ajmal Kasab. He did not allow Ajmal Kasab to shoot himself. And then the whole plan revealed. He came as a Hindu, wearing orange thread in his hand, etc., looking more like that. And they want to brand saffron terror. So basically, the whole idea is ban one or two major Hindu organizations who has a global presence, who stands up for Hindu rights, who stands up for Hinduism in India. These kind of organizations, if they manage to call them militant, call them fanatic, then they can dismantle other global organizations saying you have connected with a militant organization. And naturally, this will create a lot of fear. The Hindus going there will get disconnected. The Hindu diaspora will not be the same strength. This is their aim, but I don't think that will work, because spirit is always powerful than the matter. Spiritual Hindutva is here to stay. Spiritual Hindutva is here to live and to guide, and people will take up. And there is nothing wrong to be bothered by this term today, because the whole attempt or the narrative seems to be, get this word, connect the word with Hindu and make it Hindutva, and connect that word to terror. And this is the biggest joke. Hindu organizations called terrors. Nobody carries AK-47. Nobody carries RDX. These are the things connected to terror. We are simple people. Maximum carry a stick for self-defense. And this can't be branded, but this is the attempt they're trying. And but what happened in the recent time is really good. It awakened many, many people. People started waking up. So that is a very good sign which we saw, that these people, the attempt to dismantle global Hindutva actually united global Hindutva. And it has come up to this point where everyone started talking, and this kind of awakening is important. From here, I think we will still only continue further in the same lines, in the same vision, to establish ourselves that way. So this is what I see, spiritual Hindutva, the underlying philosophy of Hinduism. There is only one God, and that is divine. Everybody is an expression of that divine. You are nothing but the effect, is nothing but the cause. This world is nothing but God manifest. It's not God created the world. That means God is separate from this world. Hindutva is, this world is a manifestation of God. God created the world means he's sitting somewhere. That is cause and this is effect and cause has no connection. No, Hindutva doesn't believe that. Hindutva says this effect of the world is nothing but the cause in manifestation. So everyone is the same. So spiritually, that is the strength, that is the vision. And with that vision, we should continue. And the most important thing now at this point is such a beautiful vision, own it. Claim it. Be proud of the pluralistic practices in Hinduism. Be proud of its inclusiveness. Be proud of its Shruti and Smriti, what it has to offer. Be proud that we have stood the test of time. If this pride can be, like the narrative changes to being proud, proudly practicing Hindu, if that establishes, I think that would be the beautiful gift Hindutva would give, because we still don't ask anybody to come to us. We live, if you are inspired, you follow. We don't go around and asking people, this theology is not good, that theology is not good. We say all paths are fine. Every master who stood up on this earth stood with this voice. And in India, for Hindutva, I have to just conclude with what my guru said long ago. He said there are only two communities in India: who are Hindus, who were Hindus. That's it, only two. And if we continue the way in which we are waking up and doing, I'm sure many of these issues would be addressed, and global Hindutva will shine in the real term and not the narratives what people are trying to do. It was lovely talking to you people. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Swamiji. That was really an invigorating speech, highlighting that Hindutva is essentially the philosophy of oneness, of Brahma Satyam Jagan Mithya. And from this understanding of the reality of oneness comes universal acceptance. And from universal acceptance comes inclusiveness, which is what every Hindu practices and which is essentially what Hindutva is. So thank you so much for very beautifully explaining that. And in spite of all this inclusiveness, we would have often heard from various lobbies or elites that Hindutva in essence itself is discriminatory to women. It is anti-feminist, and it gives a lower position to women by design. And we've heard many such things. But what really is the reality of it? To elaborate on that, we have our next speaker, Rami Niranjan Desai ji. Ms. Rami Niranjan Desai has done her BA Honours in Theology and MA in Anthropology and Sociology of Religion from King's College, London. She has been actively involved in research and analysis in the Northeast region of India for over a decade, focusing on religious conflict and conversion, missionary impact, insurgency, demographic change, as well as border issues. She is the founding director of Northeast Policy Institute in Guwahati and has produced a large number of research papers, policy reports, as well as articles for leading journals and magazines. She has also previously been associated with TIS in Mumbai, Shyama Prasad Mukherjee Foundation in New Delhi, Northeast Policy Institute Guwahati, and India Foundation in New Delhi. Rami ji today will be speaking on the connection between Shakti in Hindutva. Rami ji, over to you.
Namaskar. Thank you, Akshaya. That was a very kind introduction of me. But it is truly an honor and a privilege for me to be here on a platform like VIGIL and as part of such an accomplished panel. But what makes this discussion particularly special to me is that I have been given this amazing opportunity to speak on Shakti in Hindutva that I also believe is the Shakti of Hindutva. And that too on a day like this, on the day of Vijayadashmi. The timing I don't think could have been better, but for this I have Arunji to thank. I have everybody who's been behind the scenes and who've done such a phenomenal job of putting this together. But also to my co-panelists like Swamiji, who has put a part of Hindutva into context for us. And I'm sure, the other panelists will also make it into such an enriching experience for us. And also I'd like to thank, without a doubt, my elders who have been a constant source of inspiration and guidance to me. Now, when I was asked to speak at this event, I immediately accepted because I believe that the subject is such that it requires defining on various levels. And I say defining and not redefining because it has yet not been fully explored or discussed in today's context in terms of what it means to the modern woman or to the modern society at large, Hindu and non-Hindu. So, to begin with, let me, with absolutely complete humility, define Shakti in Hindutva, the very title of this talk. You see, Hindutva has very often been defined as the force that offers resistance to aggression, a response to the threat towards the tattva of Hinduism. And if this is so, then we must ask ourselves, what is this force? What is this resistance and response? What is this element that changes Hinduism from being relaxed and maybe even in a slumber to waking up and saying, enough is enough. These are my boundaries. What is that trigger, that activity, that movement, and the courage to lay down the rules of engagement? Now, the answer to these questions, you will find each and every time lies in Shakti. Shakti is that element, that trigger, that response, that reform. Shakti is what reclaims collective confidence. Shakti is that movement that wakes us from our slumber. Shakti is what forms the backbone of Hindutva. Shakti is that feminine energy that is Durga, and Durga represents to us the very embodiment of strength and activity in all its forms. Of course, you see, ancient history of our civilization is replete with instances of women who have represented Shakti. Debates and discussions I've heard have often traced Shakti in Hinduism to the female icons of our civilization's ancient past, whether it's Maitri or Gargi or Hemalekha or even Jhansi Ki Rani. But you see, this discussion, I believe, has to be taken forward now. And there isn't a time like this to take it forward and put it in context and understand better, even if it makes us a little uncomfortable. After all, you know, our civilization and our civilization's philosophy rests on Samvad Vivad, to be able to discuss, disagree, enhance critical thought, which naturally results in the tracing and tracking of the metamorphosis of our society's disconnect with the very idea of the feminine, that is Shakti. This is without a doubt a very imperative exercise to our civilization's advancement. I find, you know, according to me, the problem arose somewhere around the Middle Ages when we began to see Shakti as, you know, something as otherworldly, mythical, only in the form of the divine. And this, you know, with this dilution of a greatly evolved civilization and in turn its values, which also, of course, are, you know, in my opinion, cyclical and not constant. But with the invasions, whether it was Islamic imperialism or European colonialism, we forgot that women in Bharat embody and emulate the divine Shakti. That's why we have cliches in our language towards women, like wo to ghar ki Lakshmi hai, wo to Lakshmi Swaroop hai. If a woman is angry, we'll say, wo uska Chandi Roop hai. Our language carries the vestiges of Shakti, but not our actions. And so I think we must put it in a framework, we must put it in context, and we must ask ourselves three very, very important questions. First, how did the Shakti-centric feminine lens change? Second, what replaced our Shakti-centric feminine lens? And third, and I think that's the most important, how do we reclaim our Shakti-centric feminine lens? Now, to answer your first question, why did we change the lens? And as I mentioned earlier, this transformation centered around our civilization's troubled past of the Muslim invasions and British colonialism, which at some point brought with it Victorian morality through the judgmental eyes of society that subjugated women. For example, a part of Victorian morality was women were generally expected to marry well and perform household duties and be good at motherly duties rather than seek formal education. Even literature of that time was didactic. If you read some of the literature, you'll find that it ended with always teaching the independent woman a lesson. And colonialists brought with them this exact version of Victorian morality rooted in their own ecclesiastical views of the feminine. And the idea of Shakti, by virtue of it being polar opposite, of course, was absent in this lens. They sadly not only colonized us geographically, but I find more dangerously, they colonized us mentally, replacing our lens with theirs so deftly that now we think what is their idea of the feminine is actually natural to us. Now, coming to the second question of what replaced the Shakti-centric feminine lens. You see, if one was to study the attributes of the divine goddess Durga with, let's say, Mother Mary, I think we would find that in the Indian expectations of what a woman's role in society must be, what a woman's most desired qualities must be, and what her boundaries to operate in society should be or would be, this would be more likely to be similar to the image of the characteristics that we find in Virgin Mary than to Durga or Kali or any of the divine goddesses' other forms. Now, Virgin Mary is arguably primarily seen through the lens of her being the mother of God, her perpetual virginity or immaculate conception. She's called to, by very, very placid titles like Mother Mary, Virgin Mary, Queen of Heaven, a Blessed Lady of Sorrows. Even in Islam, you will find, which carried its ideas of women's role in their society with its invasion of Bharat, they saw Virgin Mary as Maryam, as the epitome of all women. Maryam actually has a whole surah dedicated to her. And she is, in fact, mentioned more times in the Quran than in the New Testament. And the honorific names that are given to her, without surprise, are as mild in Islam as they are in Christianity. For instance, she's called Siddiqa, she who believes completely. Tahira, she who has been purified. Qanita, constant submission to God and prayers. Maryam is also considered to be so pure that she's been untouched by Satan. This reinforcing not just the limitations of a woman, but also the collective attitude of Abrahamic civilizations towards her, and therefore, obviously, towards all women. Now, in contrast, the divine goddess Durga has many names, depending on her moods, the situations, and of course, the need of the hour. Durga, the invincible, Vidya, the source of all wisdom, Vajra, the strongest and the most powerful one, and so many others. But there isn't a field of activity that the divine goddess cannot conquer. She is gentle and maternal as Parvati and ferocious and brutal as Mahishasur-Mardani. But in the end, she is the ultimate strength of even the devas. She is the ultimate equalizer. I have to say, ironically, in India today, though, it is that same display of strength, of character, and free will seen in many empowered women that is vilified through the lens of moral judgment. And the weight of this prejudice practice, let me make it very clear, sits squarely on the shoulders of not just men. It sits on the shoulders of women too. And this, without a doubt, creates a discernible conflict between this alien morality that we've adopted and this intrinsic Shakti that we believe in. And finally, let me come to the third question, to answer this, the third question of how can we reclaim the feminine, because that is really what we should be concentrating on. And the bare answer to this is Shakti has existed and continues to do so. But it thrives in Hindutva. It is us who need to embrace the values of Hindutva in its entirety. However, the complexity, of course, of these issues lie in the fact that the West has discarded Victorian morality, but we subconsciously still subscribe to it. And clearly, we have not recovered from our post-colonial hangover. Anything that is not rooted in Western practices is considered regressive. And it is, I find that it is this distortion of our civilizational values that true Hindutva not only resists but challenges. And it is this Shakti in and of the Hindutva that will reclaim the real values of the feminine in Bharat. Now, to give you an example of Shakti in the true proponents of Hindutva, let me share with you a personal experience. As Akshaya, you have mentioned, and some of you may know, I've spent a lot of time in the Northeast region of Bharat. I started traveling there when I was very, very young, and I did so alone. These were the years when insurgency was at its peak. And I thought I was being very brave and courageous and following my duty towards my civilization, towards Bharat. I thought no one was doing anything. And, it was very frustrating because you're sitting in London, you're studying there, you're analyzing these areas, and, you feel that it's out of control. I was a bit, I wouldn't say hesitant, but I was cautious because I didn't think it would be easy for a woman working in these remote areas, because I assumed there would be no women that would have gone to study these issues that were plaguing this region. Anyway, I reached there and connected to organizations that were rooted in Hindutva. And to my utter surprise, and let me say utter delight, two things happened. I was received by these organizations without any gender bias whatsoever. Neither did they hold me back in an attempt to protect me in remote insurgency-ridden areas, nor did they ever doubt my ability to complete the agenda. All they did was equip me. They equipped me with ground knowledge and other necessary tools so I could be successful in my chosen path. And honestly, our common goal, just how, I find it's just how the male divinities, the gods in the Durga Saptashti that I'm sure many of us would have read in the past 9 days, equip the divine goddess with all their greatest weapons. The Saptashti doesn't say that they did her a favor or they helped her. It says by equipping her, they showed their respect to her. Unhe sammanit kiya is the word. Therefore, becoming a part of her divine destiny. And, that, my friends, is true Hindutva, which I was lucky to be the recipient of and a part of. You see, gender has no role to play. There was this mutual confidence and a common goal towards our duty or dharma towards Bharat. There was no bigotry. And let me tell you, this was a huge, huge change from the constant awareness of your gender that you find in an urban city. And I think that's rather ironic. You would think that in a city, gender awareness, gender bias, all this becomes like really fluid. But it isn't so. And I think a lot of women who work in the city, who work in male-dominated areas would agree with me. Anyway, the second thing that I came across was, it was an eye-opener for me. That was the sheer amount of women from across the country who had joined these organizations to come and serve their nation, irrespective of the dangers and irrespective of society's expectations of them. They, in the true sense, to me, were the embodiment of the feminine, of the Shakti in Hindutva. They resisted limitations and they challenged society's stereotypes. They gave their lives to their dharma and not to wealth accumulation. And I, how I enjoyed, how I relate these stories when I came back to my very wealthy, westernized, urban, feminist friends who berated the feminine and discarded the Shakti in Hindutva, not out of some deep knowledge they had about Hindutva, but because of the limitation of their highly colonized minds. And it convinced me. it convinced me that we don't need a feminist theory in this country. What we need is to reclaim our ancient knowledge. Sure, our society has problems, we can't fool ourselves. Our society has problems when it comes to women. And like all societies, sure, there are issues with individual liberties. Sure, there are issues with free will of women. But surprisingly to me, the richer we get, the more urbanized we become, the more distant we become from our core values, and the less investment there is in asserting the real Shakti in us. More often than not, you see in the upper class women in Bharat becoming complacent and restricted to class obligations and expectations, which to me clearly proves that adopting Western values while discarding ancient civilizational knowledge does not enhance your character, does not enhance the feminine Shakti in us. Let me take a page out of all the organizations that are embedded in Hindutva. For instance, let's talk about Durga Vaini, an organization of women that endeavors to bring out the Shakti of Durga in women, to make them aware of their dharma. I believe they have something like 500 kendras and 250 centers for training. These centers not only help women in need, but they also promote knowledge, and they also push women towards financial independence. Let's look at Rashtriya Sevika Samiti. It has over 10,000 sevikas, over 2,000 shakhas that focus on character building to nation building. They are running over 500 or so seva projects, all of which are run by women, supported by women, for women. But what I find amazing, and I think very important, that these seva projects are run by their own personal funds. Even organizations like Vanvasi Kalyan Ashram, which I've had the blessing to see at very close quarters, where women go and serve amongst our Vanvasis. These areas are so remote. The terrain is so difficult. It takes pure courage and determination. And it is Shakti in Hindutva that propels this courage and awareness of our duty. Without Shakti, this universe would cease to exist. In Bharat, I find the minute we accept Hindutva and truly understand the natural balance of the feminine and masculine, not just as opposites, as not competitive, as not inferior versus superior, but just as it is, as an intrinsic part of each other, we will begin real contribution to the advancement of Bharat. I feel there has never been a time like this to understand and endorse this narrative. We must reclaim our civilizational values in their original form, adapt and accept them in the context of modern Bharat. But I think we're running out of time. So to conclude, I would just like to say that there hasn't been a time like this for a while in Bharat. The Shakti of Hindutva is yet to peak, and it will. And when it does, it will reveal all her facets in all its glory, in the reflection of the divine goddess. Thank you.
Thank you, Ramiji. And you brought in a very important point of how Hindutva or Hindu systems or Hindu structures and Hindu philosophy, they're essentially about empowering women, of making them self-dependent rather than some imposition of some virtuosity or sitting waiting for a knight in shining armor to come and save you. And somehow we had lost that. And it's very heartening to hear the stories that you told us that this is being revived now. And I do agree with you that in this, I don't know if we can call it revival of Hinduism, but women are going to play a very pivotal part. So thank you for articulating that so well. And may I remind everyone, all the participants at this stage, you can direct your questions to the host, Vigil India. We would take that up in the Q&A session after all our speakers complete. And you can follow our webinar on YouTube Live, and the links are in the chat. Our third speaker for the day is Shri Pavan K. Verma. Welcome, Pavan Verma ji. Do we have Pavan? Writer and diplomat Pavan K. Verma is a graduate in history from St. Stephen's College, securing the first position in college, after which he took a degree in law from the University of Delhi. He joined the Indian Foreign Service in 1976. He has been press secretary to the President of India, the spokesman of the Ministry of External Affairs, Joint Secretary for Africa, High Commissioner for India in Cyprus, Director of the Nehru Center in London, Director General of the Indian Council for Cultural Relations, New Delhi, and Ambassador of India to Bhutan. Mr. Verma was also a member of Parliament in Rajya Sabha from June 2014 until July 2016. A writer of depth and insight, he has written over a dozen best-selling books, including the highly successful Krishna, the Playful Divine, and Adi Shankaracharya, Hinduism's greatest thinker, which Mr. Verma has received the Kalinga International Literary Award. He was also awarded by His Majesty the King of Bhutan the Druk Tukse Award, which is Bhutan's highest civilian award. Shri Pavan Verma is here to speak on intertwining of politics and Hindutva, whether one informs the other, whether one leads the other. And we are eager to listen to what Pavan Verma ji has to say. Over to you, sir.
Thank you very much. It's a great honor and privilege to be part of this discourse, this discussion, this conversation about Hindutva. And my own view is that if Hindutva has to be evaluated, we must see it in the holistic light of both theory and practice. It's important because theories are tested against practice and practice is judged as against theory. If Hindutva stands for the essence of Hinduism, I don't believe there would be people who would have reservations about it. Hinduism's great defining framework was uttered as a Mahavakya almost in the Rig Veda, Ekam Sat Vipraha Bahuda Vadanti. The truth is one, wise people call it by different names. Another of its defining sentences is Ano Bhadraha Kritavo Yantu Vishwata. Let good thoughts flow to me from all directions. This is a religion and a spiritual anchorage which had the courage at a time when most people believed that their boundaries were the end of the world to say millennia ago, to declare Udar Charitanam Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. For the broad-minded, the entire world is your family. Hinduism per se is defined by its conquering eclecticism, its tolerance to diversity, its acceptance of plurality without losing focus on its unified narrative. With Hinduism, we have an identifiable and verifiable Hindu civilization which is remarkable for its antiquity, its continuity, its diversity, its assimilation, and above all, it speaks of refinement. So we have a religion which has not one God, not one book, not one prescribed ritual, not one pope, not one temple. Hinduism has been like that majestic river which flows in an identifiable way with tributaries joining it and enriching the mainstream as we go along, and which is why in Hinduism we have not one but six systems of Hindu philosophy: the Sankhya, the Yoga, the Nyaya, the Vaisheshik, the Purva Mimansh, the Uttar Mimansh, and each of them, in a strange way, are not dealing with conventional divinity. They are dealing with what could be the ultimate truth behind the bewildering plurality of the cosmos. So technically, they can even be called atheist. So therefore, Hinduism allows for that search to take place with an openness of mind which prevents it from losing focus but which allows it to accommodate diversity. And that is why even subsects like the Charvaks, who question emphatically the validity of the Vedas, are a part of Hinduism. The Tantrics, with their esoteric practices, are part of Hinduism. Buddhism and Jainism, which were offshoots from Hinduism, have much in terms of overlap with Hinduism. Hinduism is accommodative, and its eclectic spirit, I think, guides, and it's dialogic. Above all, it's dialogue. The Upanishads are a dialogue. The Bhagavad Gita is a dialogue. The Brahma Sutra always and invariably in their Tika Tippani include the point of view of the opponent before synthesizing the opposing points of view. So Hinduism is dialogic, and as we know of the famous Shastrarth between Adi Shankaracharya and Mandan Mishra, that two people completely opposed, one a votary of the Gyan Marg, the other of the Karm Kand Marg, met and resolved their differences through civilized discourse. So, in that sense, if the true spirit of Hinduism is sought to be pursued without necessarily making it a passive religion, it is not a passive religion. It has become Sanatan, it has survived precisely because it is not a passive religion, but it has a tensile inner resilience which allows it to accommodate diversity without losing its centrality of focus. Like the great banyan tree, which Professor Rajiv Malhotra has talked about. This is Hinduism. And in that sense, Hindutva, if it is a furtherance of this spirit, is something that all would welcome. There is a problem, however, in the political misinterpretation of Hindutva in today's context. And I think we need to focus on that because too much time has gone by saying these are random fringe elements. What is the nexus between such elements and their verifiable and increased empowerment and Hindutva? We need to examine that. We need to see whether there is a nexus which makes the fringe more mainstream or compromises the mainstream in the pursuits of the fringe. These are questions that we need to dwell about. And therefore, when Hinduism is used as a political tool to become a majoritarian credo to consolidate Hindu votes for electoral dividends, does it distort Hindutva or does it further it? This is the question we need to debate and discuss in the practical manifestation of political Hindutva. So, if we have, for instance, the Bharatiya Janata Party, which espouses Hindutva, come to power with absolute majorities in 2014 and 2019, and not even one of its elected representatives is from India's largest minority. We need to ask whether this is happenstance, coincidence, or conscious choice. Because it is unprecedented for a triumphant political party, not once but twice proving it to be so, to have such a conspicuous absence of any voices which are part of the overall vibrant plurality of India. There are other manifestations of so called in the name of Hindutva. I'll come to Savarkar briefly and his notion of the Hindu Rashtra from which Hindutva also has its origins. But the manifestation of political Hindutva, I mean, after 2010, 98% of cattle lynchings have happened after 2014. 86% of the victims have been Muslims, and the majority have happened in BJP ruled states, where very often the perpetrators of the crime have made videos of their performance, making their victims chant Jai Shri Ram while they have often been put to death even. There are countless examples, I don't need to go to it, whether it was Muhammad Akhlaq or Pehlu Khan, and these videos are available for viewing, but very often cases have been filed by those very BJP ruled state governments against the victims first, while the perpetrators, even when named by victims, are scot free. Is this a consequence of the political manifestation of Hindutva, or is it a distortion? We need to ask. We also need to see, why is it that Hindutva in its extreme manifestations in real life leads to a level of intolerance completely contrary to the eclectic spirit, conquering eclecticism, as I said, of Hinduism itself, which leads to the death, the murder of individuals like Professor Kalburgi, of Davolkar, of Govind Pansare, of Gauri Lankesh, who were shot dead. We need to ask that whether those, even if they were fringe elements who acted, were doing so to protect Hinduism in the pursuit of Hindutva, and if so, were they distorting Hinduism in so doing? These are questions we need to ask. Then there are certain actions governments take, which in my view appear to be conflating the essence and spirit of Hinduism with a level of exclusion that Hinduism does not warrant. So we have, for instance, and there can be a debate on this separately, but in my view, an act like the Love Jihad Act, which stereotypes Muslims as being essentially abductors, rapists, seducers, and also infantilizes women under a constitution which allows any adult individual to make their own choices. Uh, there is an ab initio suspicion if a woman makes a choice outside her community or religion as being necessarily induced by extraneous considerations. And the actual implementation of the act, and there has been verifiable empirical research on this, has led to the discrimination against the minority. So I'm not making a case here of appeasement of minorities. I'm talking of a level playing field and whether the inspiration of Hindutva is leading to acts which are inimical to the essence of Hinduism as reflected in the phrase Hindutva. You had, for instance, the fortunately short-lived attempt. It appears one never knows what will happen ahead of the CAA NRC. I have no problem really with the CAA except that it excludes one community. But the hyphenation of CAA with NRC is clearly discriminatory, and therefore there were nationwide protests. You could belong to either camp, supporting or opposing, but the intent to my mind was very clear, that there was a parachute available for those of a certain specified religions who could claim to be refugees from religious persecution from a specified list of countries, but none for India's largest minority. Why? What is the essential motivation for the conception of this scheme? So there is a fear which worries me. And I've just written a book called The Great Hindu Civilization, which is essentially a tribute to Hinduism and its civilizational strengths. The remarkable hyphenation between Hinduism and civilization, and the refinements, not unblemished, but the overwhelming refinements within Hindu civilization. But what happens if the leadership of this great legacy falls into lumpen hands? What happens then? What are its features? Firstly, I believe a lot among them are essentially short of the requisite knowledge about Hinduism itself. In fact, their evangelism is in inverse proportion to their knowledge. Many of the activists I have met who have been active in the implementation from their point of view of political Hindutva, if locked in a room and asked to write a two-page essay on the essential tenets of Hinduism, would fail. They don't know enough about it. And which is why the second feature of this lumpenization of Hinduism is an aversion to dialogue. There are other features which worry you. It's ultra orthodox, it's conservative, it's patriarchal, it is prone to lawlessness, it believes it is prone to violence. These are aspects of, I mean, if in Tulsidas, this is Ramcharitmanas, Ram can say to Lakshman, Par hit saris dharam nahi bhai, par peeda sam nahi athmai. There is no greater virtue than the welfare of others, and no greater injury than causing hurt to others. Here are people in the name of Ram misusing the otherwise ennobling slogan called Jai Shri Ram. It's painful for those who are admirers of Hinduism. So therefore we need to ask if these are some of the features of Hinduism. And in particular, there are two aspects that worry me greatly in the political manifestation of Hindutva. Savarkar spoke of a Hindu Rashtra and the term Hindutva in terms of defining from his point of view who have a natural claim to citizenship in a country. But Savarkar also must be understood in a bit of perspective. He was writing in 1923, 25 years before independence. He was writing when he was greatly upset by the support to the Khilafat movement and the attempt to downplay the horrific violence of the Mopla riots in Kerala. He was still in jail in Ratnagiri. He had spent 11.5 years in jail for his revolutionary conviction about fighting the British and removing them. And he was writing this short polemic on Hindutva. And in that context, he spoke about who are the natural claimants, Pitrabhu, Divyabhu, those whose ancestors belong to the country or those who on religious grounds have no extraterritorial loyalties. I question that definition, but Savarkar has himself stated elsewhere that he looks for forward to a situation when people of all communities can live together. But there are people who today espouse Hindutva who have taken Savarkar for his face value, for the face value of his comments made as far back as 1923, and continue to pursue the goal of Hindu Rashtra, which is suicidal for a modern, progressive, plural, and inclusive republic loyal to its constitution. And above all, it's one of the most impractical ideas. If the Muslims, even for a moment, were confined to one geographical area, you could speak perhaps of a Hindu Rashtra. The Muslims lie cheek by jowl across this country. And we know the percentages from Kerala to West Bengal, to UP, to Bihar, to Tamil Nadu, to Karnataka. They're not segregated. There is a compulsion in this country for many communities to live together peaceably. And then you pursue a goal of Hindu Rashtra blindly. But there are two aspects that worry me. One is, in spite of what my eminent previous speaker spoke about Shakti, which in the original Hindu inspirational framework was indeed a tribute to the divine powers of the feminine. You have the examples. I mean, there is no other religion in the world which gives the kind of status to the principle of Shakti as you see in Hinduism. And the Devi Mahatmya in the 6th century CE actually says that Shakti is above even its male counterparts. At the one level, we have the deification rightly of Shakti. At another level, we also have women, powerful women like Gargi, who have the courage to argue in an assembly in Videha called by King Janak with the leading sage and academician Yagnavalkya and stick to their point of view. If you read the Arthashastra, there are places for women in the highest echelons of society, in government and in administration. You have the example of Draupadi who could ask in an assembly, who did Yudhishthir sell first, himself or her? And yet we see from the 2nd century CE that women essentially have been subordinated, and there is a clear issue today within Hinduism of gender disparity. And yet we have today an extremely conservative, ultra-orthodox and patriarchal view of many so-called exponents of Hindutva to women. I mean, at one point, an organization in Karnataka barged into a restaurant and beat up women for not conforming to what their view of a chaste Hindu woman should be. Women are essentially commodified. They must be told how to dress, what to wear, how to speak, who to know, which relationship to have, and now even who they marry. This is an insult to the very notion and deification of Shakti within Hinduism. So therefore, we need to be introspective about this. And the other is, sometimes I have interacted with proponents of Hindutva who speak about the past in terms which actually trivialize the past, the over glorification of the past. That there were televisions, there were cars, cars used to fly, there was plastic surgery, there was in vitro fertilization. I mean, this kind of over glorification, what I call with due respect the Dinanath Batra school of Hinduism, of Hindu history, trivializes the genuine, legitimate, and real achievements in a wide variety of fields of Hinduism, which Western academia has not yet fully understood. The nuanced and cerebral civilization that Hinduism was has not been understood. And then such claims trivialize it further. So we need to introspect on such issues. And I will close by saying that Hindutva, if it means the essence of Hinduism, as I understand it, as I think Hinduism is emblematic as a Sanatan religion for millennia now, it is entirely acceptable, but its political manifestations must lead all Hindus to introspect, and therefore I have argued also that the real need today is less Hindutva but Hindu Satya. We need social reform within Hinduism. Most proponents of Hindutva forget the real legacy of Veer Savarkar, which is that he was a revolutionary for reform. He was a rationalist, he was a near atheist, he did not believe in cow worship, and he was impatient for reform within Hinduism, as was Swami Vivekananda, as was Mahatma Gandhi, as was Jyotibai Phule, as indeed was uh, Dr. Ambedkar. Reform on caste disparities, exploitation and oppression, reform on gender subordination. This is something which Hinduism, which has shown the great ability to transform and reinvent itself, must consciously look at, introspect, change, and conquer. And then we will have the Hindutva we need to see. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Pawan Verma-ji. And you have raised questions that are often asked of this theory or political manifestation of Hinduism, or what is called, or what people say is the political manifestation called Hindutva. And these are questions often asked not just in India, but it has now become a global discourse. So this now provides a good segue to our final speaker, Shri Rajiv Malhotra ji. Shri Rajiv Malhotra ji needs no introduction. He's the founder of Infinity Foundation, a non-profit based in Princeton, USA. Initially trained as a physicist, he is, and then as a computer scientist specializing in artificial intelligence in the 1970s. He became an entrepreneur and founded and ran several IT companies in 20 countries. Rajiv ji serves as chairman of the board of governors of the Center for Indic Studies at the University of Massachusetts, Dartmouth, and is a senior advisor to the Indian think tank Defense Research and Studies. He is on the advisory board of the Indian Institute of Advanced Studies, Shimla. He has authored several best-selling books, including Breaking India, The Battle for Sanskrit, and Sanskrit Non-Translatables, The Importance of Sanskritizing English. A key interest of Rajiv ji has been to interpret the dharma of our times, a need he considers vital given the sweeping changes and challenges we face. Today, he will speak on the geopolitics of Hindutva, how it is being weaponized or how it's being defined worldwide, defamed worldwide, and also how is the pushback happening worldwide. Rajiv ji, over to you.
Thank you for inviting me. I'm glad to see my friend Pawan here. Pawan is the person who launched my book, Being Different, which I think is a book that defines a large part of my work. And then I've elaborated on that book ever since. The largest chapter in that book was Sanskrit Non-Translatables. So I want Pawan to know that actually now we produced a whole book on just Sanskrit Non-Translatables as a central theme. So we go back a long way. I was very attentively listening to his talk. A lot of wisdom in it. I agree with quite a lot what he said. I also have some differences. So my take on Hindutva starts with the question, why did we need another term for something that is ancient? Is it that the substance of this tradition is new? Are we inventing something new? Or is it a new term for something old? And if it's a new term for something old, why do we need a new term? I want to start by asking that question. The literal meaning Hindu-ness or essence of Hinduism, you don't need to have a new term for that. I mean, you can just, if Savarkar didn't like Hinduism, he could call it Hindu Dharma, which is fine. Sanatan Dharma was the old name. Hindu Dharma is the new name. Why do you need to create one more term and potentially create confusion. This is an issue that we should discuss. So I don't think uh, just simply saying Hindutva means Hindu-ness, and then the whole talk one can give on Hinduism we can't simplify it that way. There must be something different about it. So let's figure out what's different about it. So some people have said that, like Shashi Tharoor's view, is that it is not bona fide Hindu-ness. This is not bona fide Hindu dharma, Hindutva, because Hindutva makes it political and assertive, whereas the traditional Hindu idea was was inward going. That is the theory, that was all inward going, adhyatmic. Now, I understand and appreciate the adhyatmic aspect. I practice it a lot. That is why I call myself a Hindu. It's for that very reason. But my response to that is that if you look at Ramayana, it is an external social political encounter. In fact, this is Vijay Dashmi Day today. So we should know that Avatar himself is engaged in a fight. So it is not all passive and inward looking. It is also response to social political circumstance of that era. And then you look at the other itihas, you look at Mahabharata, Sri Krishna also has to fight, promote a fight with Duryodhan, because it is not good enough to have soft power and try to convince him and all that stuff, because sometimes you need hard power. So I don't think it is fair to say that traditional Hindu dharma did not have assertiveness in the face of problems and opposition and enemies and so on. Ramayana is about the external enemy. He comes from a different country, different desh. And Mahabharata is a fight with the internal enemy, because they are our cousins in that situation. So whether it is a threat from external or a threat from internal, that threat has to be dealt with. It is part of Hindu-ness. It is part of Hindu dharma. It is part of Sanatana dharma, by whatever name. So therefore, that too would not be justification for coining a new term, because the phenomenon that is the political aspect and the assertive aspect has also been encountered in the past. So then what could be the purpose of this new term? I think that one has to understand the idea of a Purva Paksha in order to understand why we fell apart when external invasions happened. When we were doing Purva Paksha, we were vigilant about who's out there to get us, who these people are, what they want, what is their agenda, what are their strengths and weaknesses, what should we do differently. In other words, we would always keep up, be innovative. But for some reason, Purva Paksha did not happen when there was Islamic invasion. There was no intellectual rebuttal response, deconstruction, analysis, or at least if there was, it was very feeble. It's not part of there was no new itihas. Like there is the itihas of Ravan coming and there is the itihas of Duryodhan, there is no itihas of the Islamic invasion. And similarly, when the Europeans came to colonize, there was no Purva Paksha of who are these people, what are they doing. Somehow the lack of Purva Paksha made us kind of complacent, and we sort of lost track of where the threat is coming from. Now, the result of this was Hindus became inward, otherworldly. Some of them accepted that this new thing that is coming must be the same. And so we came up with good ways to justify, that whatever is going on must be the same. The common statement that the truth is one, and the wise people call it by many names, should not be misinterpreted to mean that all statements and all claims of all people are valid. That is not true. It doesn't say you shouldn't falsify anything. If that were the case, then you don't have to falsify adharma, because it is somebody's claim. Why do you want to fight adharma? It is somebody's claim. If somebody in geometry is making a statement that is incorrect and you refute it, in mathematics and logic, our tradition is very sharp. The idea of refuting an opponent is very sharp. So you cannot say that is his truth, this is my truth, that moral relativism, that postmodernist deconstruction is not on. So you cannot say that because the truth is one, all the claims are valid, because some claims are bogus also. It's a matter of, so it says wise men. It doesn't say unwise men also. When it says truth is one and wise people call it by many names, it does not say unwise people also. So we cannot justify the lack of Purva Paksha on the basis that everything everybody was saying must have been valid. So why do we need to do Purva Paksha? We need to do Purva Paksha, but we didn't do Purva Paksha. So this otherworldliness, uh, and especially during both during the Islamic invasion and the European invasion, this attack on deities, because the Abrahamic religions don't like idol worship and all that, what we call murtis. So this attack on deities, we became kind of ashamed of the deities. We stopped teaching Artha Shastra. We are, even until very recently, when they teach Hindu Dharma, they teach Upanishads, they teach Itihas, but they don't teach Artha Shastra, Dharma Shastra, and these are not supposed to be codified and critical editions meant permanently forever. They are smritis and not shrutis, and they are supposed to be updated. We should have been teaching Artha Shastra, Dharma Shastra, and creating new Dharma Shastra. We have to create today's Dharma Shastra, how to deal with people of different faiths that are living with us. We need to create Dharma Shastra for that. What about LGBTQ? There has to be Dharma Shastra for that. So we need to do new thinking. This requires smart people. And if we don't have good intellectuals and good leaders, and we can just recite and keep orating the old canons, we are not people of the book in that sense. We do not have frozen books that can't be updated. We are supposed to update these. Shruti is permanent, but Smriti keeps getting updated. But we haven't been writing new Smritis, and therefore, this sidelining of Artha Shastra and Dharma Shastra has been a problem, because we did not have enough political consciousness. See, responsible Purva Paksha resulting in good Dharma Shastras and Artha Shastra updating, which would require vibrant debates and discussions amongst us, would lead to a different kind of political mobilization gradually all throughout the history, not sudden knee-jerk reaction. This situation led to a lot of fragmentation because of colonization. It led to what some people have called pseudo-secularism, which means that secularism not uniformly applied. So this business of Hindu temples are controlled, but Muslim sites are not run by the government, or the Sikh, holy sites or spiritual sites. This kind of an asymmetric, unequal, which kind of is a time bomb, because it upsets the Hindus. It upsets the Hindus, and therefore it creates opportunity for political people who may not be very responsible to take advantage of it and create a Hindu vote bank. Because frustrating the Hindus on grounds which are totally unfair and unnatural is a recipe for disaster, because you cannot take the majority for a right indefinitely. You can make a fool out of some people some of the time, and all the people for some of the time, but you cannot make a fool out of all the people all the time, as Winston Churchill famously said. So trying to make a fool out of the Hindu majority with all these asymmetric policies, which are, anti-majority, in the name of minorityism, to get votes out of them, was a very dangerous cocktail which backfired. So and then there is this whole problem of translating the Dharma, translating the Sanskrit into foreign categories, and then mapping it onto those, mapping the whole framework onto those categories, digesting the genius of our tradition into foreign history, so denying us our authentic history. These have created some vacuums. So I would say that certain vacuums existed, and in the midst of all this heavy bombardment of Hindu phobia from global nexuses and some domestic ones, this muddled up our leaders. And a lot of the leaders who kind of revived Hinduism, there were two kinds. There were those who were sort of mixed up, the Nehruvian type, the very mixed up Fabian socialism, that kind of stuff, quite mixed up with the Western influences and foreign influences. And then there were some who were trying to revive something more traditional. So this led to a situation where there was a political opportunity to create a new kind of assertive dharma. Let me repeat, a new kind of assertive dharma was an opportunity, because, if you have a democracy, or in those days when Savarkar was there, we were not free, but we are an aspiring kind of democracy. If you have political camps coalescing in various faiths, various traditions, and our own faith is so open, such an open architecture, so kind of accommodating, that we are being taken for a ride. The average person starts thinking that we are being taken for a ride. So the rise of Hindutva politics today, let's come back to that point. The rise of Hindutva politics, the rise of BJP, Savarkar created something 100 years ago for his situation, but it wasn't a big deal. It was not rising. It was not a mainstream thing. The rise of Hindutva today as a political assertiveness, as a pushback to all of these things that have been happening, was because these things were allowed to happen. I mean, if they had not, during Nehru's time and during Indira Gandhi's time, if they had not done too much minority manipulation, vote banking at the expense of the majority, thinking you keep making a fool out of them, then there would not have been that opportunity for the rise of this modern Hindutva. So I would say that the climate, the soil was created partly by the British, but then the Indian National Congress afterwards kind of made it even worse. Rather than starting in 1947, getting rid of all the temple controls, getting rid of having quotas based on economic merit rather than minority, rather than caste or jati, but economic merit. If you come from an underprivileged family, doesn't matter what kind of heritage you come from, underprivileged is underprivileged. If they had leveled the playing field in the true spirit of democracy, I think there would not have been the opportunity for some people to come and push back against this injustice, bringing all the Hindus together into a big vote bank in order to give them some rights. The fact is that the rise of the BJP to give rights to Hinduism and create a major vote bank was something, the handwriting was on the wall. It happened because there was far too much injustice that the Hindus felt is happening. So the best way to, if there are people who don't want a kind of overly aggressive Hindutva, the best way is that all the parties, including CPM, including Mayawati, including Congress, they should start respecting Hinduism. They should start respect, and they should not give them privileges or because they're minority, but don't give them oppression either. Don't give them something special, but don't give the others pampering either. If you were to truly have a constitutional amendment which says there shall be no laws passed in the name of reservations, etc., which are discriminatory to any religion, any faith of any kind, that we want to upgrade the plight of those who are the downtrodden, not based on faith or identity or history, or whether you're foreign or domestic or whatever, but entirely based on your family circumstance. If you could level that playing field, that would be a true democracy. Then you would diffuse the vote banking. But guess what? You would not only diffuse the vote banking of the BJP, but also of the Mayavatis and all the different, regional, fractional, caste-based, political groups that have come up. You would diffuse all of that, and it would be for the betterment of India. So that would be the true spirit of Sanatana Dharma. Because my concern is that modern democracy has been a weapon for fragmentation, for forces of fragmentation. And because modern democracy in a parliamentary system, as opposed to, say, a presidential system, but in a parliamentary system, has given an opportunity for a lot of chota mota people to make little groups here and there and to convince a certain vote bank that the nation at large, the other caste or the other religion, whoever it might be, they are the problem, they are your enemy, and you're poor and not doing well because of those people. And so this is a dangerous cocktail. So I would say that the BJP and the rise of modern Hindutva was going to happen sooner or later. Somebody would have to do it, because either the Hindus would remain dumb and over patient and finish off, which they were not willing to do, or somebody had to come up and say, hey, listen, guess what? This is a game of vote banking. They're doing it to us. We ought to do it too. I mean, we are being taken for a ride because we don't have a vote bank. We are too tolerant, too benign, too passive. So let's get organized. So I think we can accuse and blame what happened in recent politics, and I fully sympathize that there are some issues. It is sometimes overdone. I do not want my Sanatana Dharma to be weaponized against others. I really don't want to. I espouse mutual respect. I really believe in all these principles, and I take the tenets of my dharma very seriously. There are karmic consequences if we don't do it, if we don't do the right thing. There are karmic consequences. I do not want to be part of that, of any such thing. But I feel from if you are a political analyst, the powder keg which people came and lit a match and let it blow up, that powder keg had been created by overdoing this minority pampering business and overdoing it, this caste bashing and whatnot, divide and rule kind of internally within India. And that once it's set in motion, this vote banking thing set in motion based on identity politics, then, then some people had to come up. Some people said, hey, you know what, this is a good strategy, we'll also use it. So I don't think you can accuse the political Hindutva vadis, namely the BJP, for having started something. They just joined the game. They said, why do we want to lose the game? If either there is no game of politicizing faith, keep faith out of politics completely and keep it out of reservations and things like that. Or if there is a game to be played on identity politics, we are going to play it also. So that's a kind of a view that I have. Now, it's more complex than just this. I have issues with Savarkar and some of the early thinkers of the Sangh in terms of their idea of Rashtra. So the idea of Rashtra, as I read it in their books, and by the way, I got the books which some Sangh people, I asked them which are the books to read to understand the notion of Rashtra as per your founding fathers. And so the books they gave me, written by these the early people, I read those, and the idea of Rashtra does not agree with the Vedic idea of Rashtra. Let me repeat. The ideas of Rashtra mentioned in the early writings of the Sangh Parivar, or people who influenced the Sangh Parivar about 100 years ago, are different from the ideas of Rashtra written in the Vedas. And I'm willing to have a separate discussion. It's a very big topic. I'm writing on that, on the different ideas of Rashtra that have come up from the Vedic times to more modern times. So I feel that that when we are saying when people ask me, what do I think of Hindu Rashtra? I want to, first of all, have a discussion on what I mean by Hindu and what I mean by Rashtra. Because if you talk about Vedic idea of Rashtra as described in the Vedas, I think it's a wonderful idea. But that is not the idea. The word Rashtra, even though it's the first name of Rashtriya Swayam Sevak Sangh, that word Rashtra, as has been interpreted, is not the Vedic idea of Rashtra. This is a very big topic, and you can look up what the Vedas say about Rashtra, and there are several dozen occurrences of the term Rashtra, and you will be surprised that the founding fathers did not quote. The founding fathers of this idea, modern day idea of Hindu Rashtra, did not quote from those sources. They quoted from Western sources of all. So, and then also I feel that the real problem is we forgot the Purva Paksha. So we let centuries go by, a centuries long process where we are being pushed back, we are being squeezed, the Hindus are losing up their land, more of them, they're losing authority, they're losing their houses of worship. I mean, we didn't do Purva Paksha, which was supposed to have been done by as per our tradition all along. And then after we retreated, we were bad shape. And then there's vote banking coming on top of that in modern times. So then, then we are desperate. And so when the majority feels desperate and feels that it's the victim of injustice, that's a very dangerous situation. And so there's going to be people who will come and take advantage of that. So now, of course, politicizing Hinduism, by whatever name you call it, has good things in it, because they are fixing some of these problems. Absolutely, they are fixing some problems that should not have been there. They are fixing problems, leveling the playing field. They should be doing it. And in the process, there are excesses. Absolutely, there are excesses. So, but you cannot expect that a bounce back after centuries of being oppressed is going to be perfect. There will be a lot of good things happening. I'm very glad that so many good things are happening in the name of Hindutva. But at the same time, there are also, like the examples given, some people have been unfairly killed, or some people have been killed, and other things going on, violence and all that. That I disown. Those are also happening, that I disown. So I wouldn't say that Hindutva should not have happened, because given what we went through for so long, it was something of that kind, by whatever name you give, had to happen. Nor am I saying that everything they've done is a good thing, because I think that some bad things have also happened. So we are in the early stages of a new era. We are in the early stages of the revival of Hindu Dharma, where Hindu Dharma has to be, if we are going to be a democracy, and if we are going to have vote banks, then, fine, we're going to have our vote bank too. Or if we want to change this whole law so that the vote banking is diffused, there is no need for championing a vote bank in order to get them a better deal, because the better deal will be based on merit, based on the economic and social merit. Nowadays, the technology is there. With Aadhaar card, you could score every person's, with all these artificial intelligence system and so much data, you could score each person using some algorithms on whether he has more need, less need, on a scale, give every person a rating. And then those people who are below a certain level are the ones who should be given preferences. That I fully agree with. But the moment you bring who was your bap and who was your dada, and what kind of jati he came from, or what kind of religion you have, and what kind of certificate you can get, the moment you start coalescing with groups like that, it is utterly irresponsible. And that is what the political class across the whole spectrum has been doing. So I will stop with that, because this is a big topic. But I was given 18 minutes. I lost track of time. But I'm really glad that I got this chance. And I would love to have any discussion, questions, debate, whatever the organizers would like. Thank you very much.
Thank you,
Professor
Rajiv.
Malhotra, I
Yeah, go ahead.
benefited greatly from being different while writing my book, The Great Hindu Civilization. In fact, you're quoted in it on more than one place.
You and I need to have one-on-one discussions on YouTube.
Yeah, with pleasure.
I think we should do that, because I respect with what you are saying. I have a different take on. I think that the BJP was basically saying, we want to be politically successful. This is the success formula. You have to create a vote bank. India is a land of vote banks. That is how the democracy is. Why are we going to just sit and not have a vote bank? Do you agree that Hindu vote bank was the only way out to give the Hindus a kind of a sense that somebody's championing our case? Because nobody was willing to champion our case. We were being asked to be apologetic for being Hindus. I was very concerned. Why am I having to apologize? All over the world I go, I have to. The moment I say I'm Hindu, the moment I say yoga is of Hindu origin, I'm not saying others should not do it. I'm not saying that yoga others should not do it. I'm saying it is of Hindu origin as a historical fact. What's wrong with that? And I would be attacked. So I became a sympathizer of this revival, because I felt there's no other way that we're going to get a fair shake. And the temple control, and these quotas based on identity, I think this has been a disaster. So I would love to hear your views on it.
No, I agree with you. In fact, I've catalogued in my latest book, The Great Hindu Civilization, the reasons for the evolving angst among Hindus for legitimate and verifiable reasons.
Yes.
At the same time, having understood that and being able to explain the rise of Hindu aggression, or at least a self-conscious attempt for greater assertion, I also critique the ultra-Hindu right for its distortions of some of the tenets of Hinduism. So we will have a discussion separately on this. I was very short of time today, but I was in particular, of course, interested to listen to all the panelists and to you, and it's been a great pleasure. Please continue. I would ask the moderator.
And we would love to host this one-on-one discussion between you and Rajiv ji. That could be one of our future programs. Thank you so much for joining us. And
thank you, Pawan. Thank you. Let's stay in touch.
God bless.
We have a lot of questions. We've just been bombarded with the questions, so we move on to that quickly. The first question is, if someone says that they are in favor of Hinduism but against Hindutva, what should be our response? And I'll put this to Rajiv Malhotra ji.
Well, if somebody says that, I will start by defining Hindutva. I will say that Hindutva is a justified political response to assert Hinduism at a time when there was no other option. I mean, Hinduism on its own is not going to expand and attack and aggressively go to some other country and wage war. We never did that. So the reason that people got sick of being victims, being hit all the time, being all our lands being taken, temples being taken, just being blamed, accused, a lot of Hindu phobia in all the textbooks and everywhere. The Hindus needed to push back. So therefore, a large number of Hindus who personally, they were not BJP supporters or Jan Sangh supporters. So many people I know, they said, this is the way. This is the way. They are the people who champion and give us some rights. So I think that the way you justify Hindutva is that it is the path to equality for Hindus. We are not asking for superiority. We are not asking that, we should take over other people. We are only saying we want to take back what is ours, what is justifiably ours. We don't want unfair and unequal, allocation of resources in the name of reservations. Reservations should be only for people below a certain poverty line. It should have nothing to do with your religion or jati or any of that stuff. So Hindutva became a way to get justice for the majority, because in the name of pampering the minority, injustice was being done to the majority. This is a very unique situation. I tell this to Americans that there is no other civilization I know which was colonized by a minority for so long. And therefore, the meaning of being a minority is a different meaning. In India, it's a different meaning. In America, when they say minority, it's blacks. Blacks did not rule over Americans. Blacks were not the foreigner guys who came and ruled over the whites. So when we talk about sympathy for blacks, it's because the whites actually ruled over them and made them into slaves and oppressed them. And so now there is some sympathy for them. That's a very wonderful thing. But in India, the minorities are the people who were ruling over the majority. This is a very different situation than anywhere else in the world. So our people must know how to articulate this.
Absolutely. And there is some amount of gaslighting where the oppressed is classified as the oppressor, like you rightly pointed out. The next question would be to Swami Mitrananda ji. Is there civilizational weakness in Hinduism? Why is there always failure or defeat when confronted with violence, especially in countries like Pakistan, Bangladesh, or Afghanistan? Is there a way out of this civilization weakness, if there is one?
Am I audible?
Yeah. Yes, Swamiji, you are.
The structure of Sanatana Dharma was very beautifully structured. There are thinkers, there are rulers, administrators, there are businessmen, and there are workers. Okay. At some point of time, the Kshatriya force in India, in Bharat, slowly took up to more of a compassionate thinking types. This led, gates were opened, and India started, or Bharat was being attacked continuously. This Kshatriyatva which we lost became a source of invasion. And once we were invaded, naturally, we were not ready for this kind of a war, because the Mahabharata war, the Ramayana war were completely different. The wars with the Hindu kings fought among themselves were completely different, because the wars had a civilizational rules. There were war codes. The war codes were very clearly defined. A person on an elephant will fight a person on an elephant. One on a horse will fight on a horse. Things like that. Temples will not be destroyed. Granary will not be burnt. Elderly people will not be touched. Women and children will not be touched. These were the war rules with which we were fighting. When the Cholas fought the Cheras, or the Cheras fought the Pallavas, this is the kind of war we had, where the rules were very clear. It is more like a competition. You win and you say, I'm powerful now. I'm declaring myself as a king. So the war had a different kinds of rules. But when we turned into a kind of a compassion, when our forces became weak, and after that, when we were invaded, we were not prepared for this kind of a war. We never dreamed that in a war, your women can be taken away, your children can be slaughtered, your temples can be broken down, your granary can be burnt, your wealth can be looted and gone. This didn't happen. We were not. We were more civilized. If you read Mahabharata, in Mahabharata, if you see, I'm talking about a civilizational value, the value in which the civilization was living. The cooking department, the kitchen was common for the Pandavas and the Kaurava armies. Can you imagine a war of that kind where you go to a kitchen which is common for both the Pandavas and the Kauravas? It was common. So after the war, after the sunset, you can meet your opponent, your enemy, sit together because he could be your cousin or your brother or somebody known. And next day you come back to fight. So the system and the dharma of that time and the war rules were completely different. We as Indians were not ready for this kind of an attack because we were so deeply involved in dharmic way. And when this kind of an attack came, unpreparedness went. The best way would be, what is the way out? The best way would be educating back the Hindus their basic principles of life. The knowledge, what we have, if that reaches out again and more people, you become good. You become good, like Krishna being good. Krishna can understand what was the enemy's mind. He could understand what they were doing. After all, if you look at Gita, it was a conversation between two warriors. And Krishna understood the enemy. He was well informed. He didn't allow the enemy to overrule him. He managed it. So knowledge of this kind, spiritual knowledge, if it comes back, I think the self-worth will come back. People will understand what we are. This is called, the awakening has happened, and it needs some more time. Like Rajiv Malhotra pointed out so clearly that we have been a victim for a long time. Come on, enough. I need to get up. So when we need to get up, what are the process? There is a transit period. I think we are in the transit period where our knowledge, which is the strength of our civilization, reaches to our own people. The right history has to be written and the right books has to go in. We don't reach our books. Now, where do a Hindu gets to read Bhagavad Gita? Or where does a Hindu get to read Upanishad? Or where does a Hindu get to read Mahabharata, Ramayana or a Purana? Where? The schools we don't teach. The universities we don't teach. For after being free as an independent nation for this many years, or before under the colonial rule, or when they were invaded, all this was lost. So now is an age when this knowledge comes back. I think the self-worth will come back and people will stand up. So bringing back the knowledge is one which plays a vital role. And for that, you need politically someone standing up and saying, these are some of the best things. These are your civilizational values. This has to be taught. So it's really good if you see the government is now thinking of introducing Arthashastra and Bhagavad Gita to the Indian army. This is something really important. Indian army should know. Because after all, even the Gita was a conversation between two warriors. How empowering it would be. So it has started. For it to continue to establish, you don't need forces which will suppress it. You need to stay there for some more time to establish this. And what does Gita do? Gita doesn't tell you to go and attack somebody. Gita tells you to live life rightly, live life to your full potential, and don't allow anybody to attack you. Take guard yourself. These are the values. So I think bringing back the Adhyatmic aspect to as many people as possible through our universities, through our schools, if we can bring it back, because that's the only education system we have right now. If we can bring it back into that fold, I think a lot of things will change. That's what I think will work.
Well said. The study of Shastras is important for all of us, I think. The next question is to Rami ji. There is often an accusation that even though Hindus worship the sacred feminine in temples, in the real world, women are harassed or discriminated against, or there's domestic violence. And this is often a question that the enemies would ask. So how do we respond to it?
I have heard these comments many times before. This is nothing new, but I have to say that this is particularly aimed at the religion as well as the Hindu society. You know, there is this idea that, you know, if you're westernized or you know, there is larger respect for women. But if we were to look at some of the statistics, you will find that some of the Nordic countries have the most amount of issues with women's rights in terms of women's safety and protection. Even if you look at the Northeast, Nagaland violence broke out in 2017 when the state government issued a notice saying that there'd be a 33% reservation for women in the local urban election bodies. So having said that, I think the only way you can respond to this is by your knowledge of you know, the statistics in comparison to other countries which are considered very advanced. But also, you know, you have to accept that there are some issues. You have to accept that we have moved away from what we believed was our Shakti, or what we believed was our, you know, what we believed was a part of our civilizational knowledge. And that knowledge carried with it the idea of equality, the idea of, you know, there being a very minimal gender bias. We've moved away from that. And the reason we've moved away from that is because we are confused about where we belong. You know, on one hand, we want to be considered westernized. On the other hand, we want to carry, like I said in my talk, we want to carry these you know, Victorian moral values, which do not really somehow fit into what we expect out of modern life. So I think, you know, we have to understand where we want to be, what we are doing with, you know, the lenses that we are approaching situations with, and those lenses aren't necessarily correct just because we follow a religion or just because we adhere to certain principles of a culture, civilization, doesn't mean it automatically makes us correct. You know, again, taking an example from the Northeast, if you look at the Northeast, which is largely now Christianized, and this also happened post independence, you will find that a lot of the states are the states which have the most amount of issues with women's safety. Some of these states are also states that have matrilineal societies, you know. So at the end of the day, I think we have to look at it from a point of view of individual responsibility of learning and relearning what our principles really should be. Number two, we need to clarify our thoughts. We need to have some amount of clarity between, you know, where we are coming from and where we want to go. And I think that would possibly be, you know, a better way of looking at things.
Yeah, better understanding of the real essence, and that could inform better behavior. So there are many more questions, but unfortunately we've run out of time. But we will leave contact details of the speakers, which they have given us. So if you have any questions, you could reach out to them, or you could even tweet to Vigil or follow us on Facebook and leave comments. We unfortunately have to close the webinar now. Thank you so much to all our speakers, Swami Mitrananda ji, Rami Desai ji, Raji Malhotra ji, and Pavan Verma ji has left, but thanks to him and thanks to all of you for sparing your valuable time today evening and articulating so well what Hindutva is, and more importantly, what it isn't. We have heard varied opinions. There were some differing opinions, But the one common facet of all is these are all voices of people who really are invested in India and who have skin in the game of Hindus themselves, and not by some few global elites who peddle propaganda based on not facts, but bias and sometimes just bigotry. So today was a small step in reclaiming that narrative. And I hope everyone has enjoyed this webinar and has taken away something from this. Thanks to all the participants who so patiently stayed with us for 2 hours. We've gone over time a little bit, but thanks for staying with us. Please follow Vigil on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. This talk is on YouTube. We would be uploading it shortly. Thank you for participating with your questions, and it was quite lively. We now end the program with Shanti Mantra. Om Sarve Bhavantu Sukhinah, Sarve Santu Niramayaha, Sarve Bhadrani Pashyantu, Ma Kaschid Dukkha Bhag Bhavet. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Thank you, everyone, and good night.
Namaskar.